I just wanted to ask you a small question that as you said that non-Muslims we can, it's better to give Arabic text with the translation. So we don't touch the Holy Quran without wuzhu. We know like what is ghusl and wuzhu. So they are allowed to read like that without wuzhu. And excuse me, one small more question. That during traveling, the compact Quran Sharif is allowed, you said it's good to read instead of going into other things. So that time also wuzu is required, no? Like traveling full time, you need to have wuzu, no?
The sister asked a question that don't we require to have wudu when we read the translation or the Arabic Quran? And when we give the Arabic Quran to non-Muslims, without wudu, how can they touch? Regarding wudu is required or not, sister, there are various different schools of thought, And when they quote the quotation which I said, Surah Waqiah chapter 56 verse 77 and 80, that quotation does not refer to human beings, it refers to angels. And I said in my talk that they prove it from the Quran, you should have wudu, it's a misinterpretation. And I have given you several references. It actually refers to the angels. It doesn't refer to human beings. But there are different schools of thought. For example, the Hanafi, the Shafi, the Maliki, the Hanbali, each one have their different school of thought. The Hanafi says that you cannot touch without wuzu, but if it's covered with a piece of cloth, you can touch it. Some Hanafi scholars say that the cover itself, the hard cover itself comes in between, so you can touch the Quran without a cloth, but with a cover. Some say you can touch the Quran, but not the Arabic text, various views. Among the Shafi scholars say that you cannot touch without wudu, even if it has a cover. Various views. Malikis say somewhat similar, but the Malikis say that if a student wants to learn the Quran, and if a teacher wants to teach the Quran, even without wudu they can touch. Even if they are in the stage of danaba, of ceremonial impurities, the Maliki school of thought says that you can touch if he is a student who wants to learn the Quran, and if he is a teacher who wants to teach the Quran. Because otherwise, the ladies who are doing hifz of the Quran, they will forget within the few days. Different school of thought. Humbly is different school of thought. If you analyze that even the Zahiri school of thought, what they say, and Ibn Hazm, he has discussed this thing in detail. According to Ibn Hazm, he says there is no prerequisite, there is no condition at all for touching the Quran. But naturally, all scholars agreed, wudu is preferable. But according to Ibn Hazm, he has quoted several hadith, several Quranic references saying there is no authentic hadith which clearly specifies that any condition is required. You can even touch the Quran without wudu, you can even touch if you are in ceremonial impurities. According to Ibn Hazm, various different opinions. But if you analyze that even the hadith, which the scholars quote of the Muwatta, that you should be tahirin, the person should be tahirin, pure. If you analyze the Arabic word, it actually means those who are pure. It does not refer to those who are in wuzu only. And this commentary you can find in Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi, in Dawutul Quran of Shams Pirzada, in Ibn Qasir, in Zamakhshari, in various. That it refers mainly that you should not be in ceremonial impurities. Even if you agree that the hadith is sahih, that tahirin means that you should not be in ceremonial impurity. If you are in ceremonial impurity, means after sexual intercourse, or if you are having menstrual cycles, at that time you should not touch, according to that hadith, if it is sahih. It doesn't refer that you should be in wudu. But there are different schools of thought. You can ask them why they think that way. But I agree with it totally, that with wudu is much preferable. But touching without wudu is not haram, because nowhere does the Quran say, neither does any sahih hadith say about that. Regarding can it be given to non-Muslim? According to Ibn Hazm, even a Muslim can touch in the state of ceremonial impurities. Whether it's right or wrong, you can refer to his books and check it up. But if you agree with that, a non-Muslim can also touch. But my main argument which I put forward, as the Quran says, reason with the people with hikmah. Udu ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah wal ma'uzat al hasana wajadilum billati ahsan. From Surah Nahl chapter 16 verse 125, he says, invite all to the way of the Lord with wisdom and beautiful preaching, and argue with them and reason with them in the ways that are best and most gracious. If you analyze, the Quran gives a challenge. One of the challenges I mentioned in the answer to Alif Lam Mim, that try and produce a surah like the Holy Quran. If all the human beings got together, The Quran says in Surah Isra chapter 17 verse number 88 that if all the human beings got together along with the jinns, they will not be able to produce the like of the Quran. And again the Quran says in Surah Nisa chapter 4 verse 82, it says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. That do not they consider the Quran with care. Had it been from anyone besides Allah, there would have been many contradictions. There would have been many discrepancies. So Quran gives the challenge to those who don't believe in the Quran, the non-Muslims, that do you not consider the Quran with care? Had it been from anyone besides Allah, there would have been contradictions. So when the non-Muslim has to consider the Quran, when Allah gives the challenge, but naturally he has to hold it in the hand. He can't check whether the Quran has contradiction or without holding it. So when Allah gives the challenge to them, and if they can hold it, then who are we to stop them? And if Allah holds me responsible on the day of judgment, I said in my talk, I will be in the company of my beloved Prophet. When the beloved Prophet can give verses of the Quran to non-Muslim, do you think you're more holier than the Prophet? You're more holier than the Prophet? Prophet gave verses of the Quran to non-Muslims. So why can't we give? So if you analyze and read the Quran with understanding and the Sahih Hadith with understanding, you will realize that we should deliver the message to the whole of humankind, including non-Muslim, as well as give them the message of the Holy Quran. Hope that answers the question.